This is a guide on how to make cardamom buns. So this video is over a year in the making. Last New Year's of 2022, I had a phone call with my friend Linnea, and she told me about how she wanted to tackle her white whale this year and make cardamom buns. And we waited until December of 2023 to make it, and now I'm editing it here in 2024. So this video is over a year in the making. And yes, I know that the white whale is a reference to Moby Dick, but all I had is a copy of The Old Man in the Sea, which, I mean, it's kind of the same thing if you think about it. But anyway, here's the recipe. For the dough, you'll need 4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of dried yeast, half a cup of sugar, 1.5 cups of milk, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 4 tablespoons of unsalted softened butter. And for the cardamom filling, you'll need half a cup of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 2 to 4 teaspoons of cardamom, and half a cup of unsalted butter, also softened. And additionally, for the toppings and final touches, you'll need pearl sugar, 1 egg for the egg wash, some additional cardamom, and water, also for the egg wash. And also a little bit of orange zest, so you'll need an orange. For those of you who don't know what cardamom is, it's a spice that is found in the ginger family. It tastes really good. I really like it. It's kind of peppery, but it's kind of a little like licorice-y. But it's also very like floral too, so it's a little all over the place. It's a really fun spice, and I really enjoy it. For this recipe, you have a couple different options. You could either use pre-ground cardamom, or you could use just the seeds, or you could actually get the pods themselves and pick out the seeds by themselves. So what we did is we used the seeds, and they were the black cardamom. There's black and green cardamom. We used black just because it tastes a little differently. I think it's a little more smoky than the green one. And yeah, so we used the seeds themselves, and then we ground them, and you'll see that later. We ground them in a mortar and pestle. For equipment for this recipe, you'll need a standing mixer. Be careful, it's heavy. A dough hook for the stand mixer. 2 large mixing bowls. 1 rolling pin. A mortar and pestle. 1 cup measuring cup. 1 half a cup. 1 tablespoon, 1 teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon, 1 pizza cutter, 1 spatula, 1 pastry brush, 1 16-inch by 12-inch metal baking sheet, and 1 grater. It's not like a cheese grater, so it's just like, I guess it's just called a grater. So to make this recipe, I just wanted to say before we get started that we kind of messed up the first step. We were using active yeast, which you do need to activate, and we kind of forgot to activate it. But we still, other than that, we did pretty much everything in the recipe right. So basically, what we should have done is warm the milk in the microwave, which we did, and then we should have added in the yeast, sugar, and then let that sit for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then we should have added in the flour and then mixed it. Unfortunately, what we did do is we warmed the milk, and then we just kind of added in the flour, sugar, and yeast, and the salt into the mixing bowl, and then we just poured the milk in and started mixing it. So if you're going to do it properly, if you have the activated yeast, or if you have the yeast that you need to activate, you need to add in the warm milk, the sugar, and the yeast, and then let that sit for about 15 minutes. And then add in the flour and then start mixing. So hopefully that helps. That's just a little mistake we did. It still tasted fine. The recipe still worked. It was just a little like denser because the yeast wasn't activated, so it didn't really rise. But other than that, this is the recipe. Then once all of those ingredients are incorporated and mixed together, you should have a rough dough, and then you can add in the butter, and make sure to do that 1 tablespoon at a time. Then once all of the butter is added, then you continue kneading the dough in the stand mixer on medium speed for about 15 minutes. And during that 15 minutes, Linnea held down the stand mixer so it didn't wobble too much, and I just kind of stood there. Once the dough has been fully kneaded, in a large mixing bowl, lightly oil it using butter or some other oil, and then place the dough inside of the bowl and cover it with either a towel or some kind of plastic wrap. And then this is the first proofing period, so you're just gonna, once you have it covered, you're just gonna put it somewhere warm for about an hour to an hour and a half. So you just gotta wait. There's a lot of waiting in this recipe. We did an hour and 15 just to be safe, and I think we ended up doing a little bit longer, so it did end up being just about an hour and a half. But while you're waiting that hour and a half, you get to start the next step, which this was one of my favorite parts of this process. Take the 3 teaspoons of cardamom, if it's not pre-ground, and put it in a mortar and pestle and start grinding that up. I really love doing this. It made me feel like an old wizard or an old alchemist, just grinding up the herbs. Yeah, it was fun. And then you want it to be kind of granulated and a little powdery, and yeah, and then it should be ready to you're ready to start the next step, which is making the filling. So for the filling, in another mixing bowl, add in the softened butter, the sugar, the salt, the cardamom, and the orange zest. Then, using a spatula, mix it all together until it's consistently consistent. It should be a sort of weird gritty texture, but if it is, that means you're doing something right. So, after you've made the filling and the dough has proofed for about an hour and a half, you're going to remove the dough from the bowl and use the rolling pin to flatten it out. You're going to want it to be a pretty large rectangular shape. I don't know the exact measurements for this, but it was pretty big, and maybe about half an inch thick, I would say, if I had to guess, quarter inch, half an inch thick. But yeah, a pretty large rectangle. And then on the longer half, on one half of it, using the spatula and the filling, you'll rub the filling over pretty much one half of the dough, the flattened out dough. And then once you've used all of the filling, you'll fold up the other half of the dough to cover the filling. And yeah, once that part of the dough has been folded over, then you're going to use the rolling pin again to gently push out any air bubbles that may have gotten in there and get those all out of there. Next, with a ruler, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. You need a ruler for this also. Once you have a ruler or measuring tape, you're going to measure along the shorter side of the rectangle and make little cuts every roughly half an inch or so. So that's about like a centimeter and a half, 2 centimeters. But yeah, make marks every roughly half an inch to 3/4 of an inch. And then using a straight edge and a rolling pin, you're going to make long cuts along the long end of the rectangle. So you have these long strips. Once we were done with it, we had about 20 or so of these. It might be different depending on how big your rectangle was. Once all of the dough and filling has been cut into strips, you're going to do the next step, which is pretty fun. Making the stuff with the mortar and pestle was fun, but this is also really fun. You're going to form the dough strips into the buns themselves. So the way we did this is you kind of make the Star Trek, I didn't get a close-up of this, I'm sorry. You kind of make the Star Trek symbol with your hand, so that your pointer and your middle finger, and then like a gap, and then your ring and your pinky finger, and you do loops around the full thing, and you do about 3 or 4 loops until you have about a third of your dough strip left, and then you go kind of through the middle and then wrap around like a little belt. I didn't get a close-up of this really, but that's the best way I can describe it. It sort of looks like ribs. When it's done, it kind of looks like ribs with like a rib cage. But that's kind of the main shape that we were going for. We kind of nailed it with some of them, and other ones don't really look like it, but that's okay. And then I think with the end we either tucked it under or inside of the bun itself, where you kind of pinch it together. Whatever you can do to get the ending part of the dough to stick. I think we just sort of pinched it and like wrapped it around and pinched it. Then after you've made all of the buns, you're going to proof them again before we bake them. So in a large baking pan, you're going to proof them for about 30 minutes or so. This is a step also that was altered a little because we didn't activate the yeast at the beginning, so it took us, I think we waited about 45 minutes. And they still rose a little bit, but not as much as they would have if we'd activated the yeast. While the dough is proofing, there are actually 3 things that you can do. You can preheat the oven to 390 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you're using the whole seed cardamom, you can go ahead and grind up more of that in the mortar and pestle. And you can also make the egg wash. And to make egg wash, all you do is take a little bit of water and an egg, and you scramble it all together. And you got watery egg. Then once the buns are done proofing, you rub the egg wash on gently, and then you can add on the pearl sugar and the cardamom. After the buns have been decorated, you can put them in the oven for 20 minutes. If you look in about halfway through that, about 10 minutes in, and notice that the buns are browning a little too fast, you can put a layer of aluminum foil over them, and that will sort of reduce the browning that happens. But yeah, after about 20 minutes, they should look pretty dang good. These are ours. And yeah, they were really good. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there was that one little thing where we forgot to activate the yeast, but they still tasted awesome. And this was a really awesome recipe. This was probably one of the hardest recipes I've done. This was my first time baking with yeast. Pretty much all the recipes I have on this channel are, flour and baking powder or baking soda. So it was cool working with yeast. We learned a lot about it. Like I said, I've never baked with it before, so I learned quite a bit. This was also my first time trying cardamom that I know of, and it was awesome. These were really great, and yeah, I definitely recommend trying this one if you got a lot of time. It does take a while with the 2 proofing periods. The first one being, I think, what was it, an hour and a half, and then the second one being another 30 minutes, and then also just sort of the bake time and everything, and then clean up. This recipe is definitely one if you got like a day clear to try it. So, but if you do have a day clear and you wanna try this recipe, I'd recommend trying it. It was awesome.